Welcome to Whisky Cast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is our year-end special for December 31st, 2025. This episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Dewar's, the House of Suntory, and Glendalough Irish Whiskey, and we thank them for their support during 2025. The year in review, right after this. Crafted with time, shaped by nature, perfected by generations. From Yamazaki to Hibiki to Hakushu, every drop of House of Suntory whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from. House of Suntory, this is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
Food's gone, stories are flying, and everyone's laughing a little too loud. That's when Dewar's 12-year-old feels right at home. Enjoy the holidays from your friends at Dewar's.
On the face of it, 2025 looked like a rough year for the whiskey industry. Declining sales, production cuts, and a steady drumbeat of bad headlines. But those declines came after nearly a decade of record growth in sales and production, and some retrenchment was inevitable, just made more painful by the political landscape and macroeconomics. Over the last 10 years, spirits have steadily taken market share from beer and, to a lesser extent, wine. Discus reported back in 2015 U.S. distilled spirits supplier sales were up about 4.1% to roughly $24 billion, with volumes up by 2.3%, as whiskey, tequila, and cognac did the heavy lifting. Fast forward to the mid-20s, and spirits climbed into the low 40s share of total market share and beverage alcohol revenue, edging out beer while wine held roughly steady in the mid-teens. For years, premiumization meant revenue growth outpaced volume growth, but in 2023 and 2024, that pattern broke. Discus data shows 2024 spirits supplier revenue down about 1.1%, even as volumes rose 1.1%. So 2025 sits at the intersection of three trends: a long premiumization boom finally losing steam, consumers trading down or drinking a little less, and trade and tariff battles injecting a new kind of uncertainty. The most impactful whiskey story of the year did not start in Scotland, Ireland, or Kentucky, but in Washington, D.C., as U.S. President Donald Trump's trade tariffs dominated whiskey industry headlines in 2025. The Trump administration negotiated trade deals with the U.K. that included a 10% tariff on U.K. exports to the U.S., with no carve-out for wines and spirits. Same with the European Union, except the tariff was set at 15%, and it's set much higher for other countries. As Chris Swanger of the Distilled Spirits Council told us earlier this year, the whiskey industry is collateral damage in a wider trade war.
What we have to understand is this administration is working in trying to resolve some long-standing issues that they have determined are critical for national security and critical for broader economic vitality. Steel and aluminum manufacturing is critical. When the United States only has 5 or 4% of the global steel and aluminum market, and you need steel and aluminum for national security, when markets like China and Russia have the bulk of the steel and aluminum market, this administration has determined, God forbid, if we get in a global conflict, we don't want to have to source our steel and aluminum from China and Russia. So we have to recognize that this administration is determined to try to resolve some significant infrastructural challenges for industry. But at the same time, there is no reason for the distilled spirits industry and the great U.S. hospitality industry that is intertwined with our Mexican and our Canadian and our European and our UK trading partners to be implicated or embroiled in this.
The tariffs also set off a trade war with Canada, even though spirits are supposed to be covered under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. The retaliatory 25% tariff imposed on American whiskeys by former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau ended up being only part of the story. Provincial leaders, led by Ontario Premier Doug Ford, exercised the nuclear option and removed all American products from their government-run liquor stores. Average Canadians largely embraced the boycott. One Whiskey Cast community member in Eastern Ontario wrote, "I have about half a bottle of Weller's Antique 107 left, and after that's gone, that will be the end of my bourbon consumption." Brown-Forman CEO Lawson Whiting called that worse than tariffs because with tariffs at least his products were still on the shelves. With only two provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, still stocking American whiskeys and other U.S. spirits, Brown-Forman's sales in Canada were off by around 60% since the boycott began in March. That was just part of a difficult year for the largest U.S. publicly traded spirits company. Brown-Forman laid off about 12% of its staff, closed its cooperage in Louisville, paused distilling at Glenglassaugh for several months, decided to shutter Benriach for up to 2 years, and cut production at Glendronach Distillery in Scotland. Diageo didn't fare much better. Declining sales worldwide led to the firing of CEO Deborah Crew after just 2 years on the job. The company tapped former Tesco CEO and Unilever executive Sir Dave Lewis to take over this January. Interim CEO and CFO Nick Jangiani launched a $625 million cost-cutting program that paused production at Balcones, Bulleit, Dickel, and Teaninich distilleries, and even halted operations at the Rose Isle Maltings in Speyside. That move may turn into a long-term shutdown. Diageo is also closing its Crown Royal blending and bottling plant in Amherstburg, Ontario, and moving production from that plant to the U.S. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, emboldened by the success of his American whiskey boycott, pledged to pull Crown Royal and other Diageo products off LCBO shelves the day the last worker walks out of the plant. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario is the world's largest single buyer of alcohol wholesale. But for now, Diageo is ignoring the threat, putting the plant up for sale while negotiating a severance package with the union. Tariffs and political fights are reshaping trade flows, prices, and even where distilleries operate. That's the macro layer. The micro layer, the craft world, is feeling it even more acutely. According to the American Craft Spirits Association, U.S. craft spirits sales fell about 6% in volume in 2024, the second straight year of decline, and 2025 is likely to show a third straight year. ACSA says an average of one distillery is closed each week this year, with the total number of active craft distillers dropping around 25%, and several high-profile bankruptcies, including the liquidation of Oregon's Rogue Ales and Spirits. It's been a perfect storm this year for craft distillers, according to Becky Harris of Catoctin Creek Distilling.
Nothing good right now is really going on for craft distillers as far as the overall state of the market is pretty unfriendly to craft distillers right now. As distributors continue to consolidate, as retailers and wholesalers clear their books of things that they don't think are moving enough. Brand building is right now a thing that most wholesalers and retailers aren't interested in, and so it's really cramping down on the ability of craft distillers to get attention for their products and to retail their products.
We'll hear more from Becky in just a few minutes. Portland-based Westward Whiskey survived Chapter 11 and emerged with new ownership led by some of the original investors in the distillery. CEO Tom Mooney told us Chapter 11 bankruptcy remains a viable option for some of his colleagues facing financial troubles.
Any industry that has grown and changed as much as ours has, there will be that process of creative destruction in which some things don't make it, but others continue to grow, and then the industry changes over time. I mean, to me, what's remarkable about all of the different challenges that different companies have had this year is the degree to which each story is unique. right? So it's this is the part where I paraphrase Tolstoy, but I think every spirits company in financial distress is in distress for its own reasons. I think that there are definitely some overall headwinds, but I think each company that went through difficulties this year has their own story, and it's unique to them.
And then there's the Uncle Nearest saga. Once seen as a modern success story, the brand went into receivership in August after defaulting on more than $100 million in loans. The receivership effectively removed founder Fawn Weaver and her husband Keith from operational control, and they've been fighting to retain control ever since. As of now, the court-appointed receiver is weighing whether to sell all or part of the company's assets, with a key hearing scheduled for January 30th, 2026. At the same time, Kentucky distillers are sitting on record-high inventory. More than 17 million barrels of spirits are aging in the Commonwealth's rickhouses. Analysts say bulk whiskey prices have cratered in recent months, raising concerns that the industry has been overproducing just as demand starts to ebb. Eric Gregory of the Kentucky Distillers Association called it a case of the glass being half full or half empty.
Having 16.1 million barrels of bourbon and 17.1 million barrels when you count other spirits aging in Kentucky is a bit of a double-edged sword. First of all, it's glass half full when you look that we've got more distillers in Kentucky than ever before, now counting 127. We've got several more on the way, which is creating jobs and investment. We're in 49 of Kentucky's 120 counties, the most we've ever been in before. And when you look at the fact that a lot of the barrels, in fact, most of the barrels that are aging right now won't be dumped and bottled until, 2030 and beyond, we're poised, to be able to meet any demand that comes our way then. Now, glass half empty, there's a lot of things happening in the industry right now that are giving people pause. We've got the uncertainty over tariffs and the global markets. We've got changing generational habits in drinking. We've got inflation and the competition for leisure dollars. And we've got everything from weight loss drugs, that curb alcohol to, a lot of people just not drinking anymore. And at that point, you start saying, okay, we've got a lot of whiskey on hand that's being taxed, every year it ages. We're going to have to right-size inventory.
Bourbon Hall of Fame distiller Craig Beam, now at Jackson Purchase Distillery, suggested during the Kentucky Bourbon Festival that these declines are part of a long-term cycle.
I've been in the business for almost 40 years. I think I call this normal, 5 days a week. Everybody's running still pretty steady. I went through this back in the late 80s and saw the slowdown then, and people shut down for 3 or 4 or 5 months at a time, even a year. One distillery shut down for a year and a half. One of the major distilleries did, and he's even talking about selling it at one time, but then it finally bounced back, and people started expanding, running 7 days a week, running 45, 46 weeks out of the year, and it took off, I guess, in the late 90s, and it's been really a boom. So right now, I think it's just something that's back to what I consider normal, since I've been around for almost 40 years doing this. I don't have any fear. I think you got to make some adjustments in the distillery. You got to look at your workforce, make sure you're not overloaded with people, and if you have to, make some adjustments to your equipment. You got to cut back a little bit. That's what we did. We cut back a little bit, made some minor adjustments at Jackson Purchase.
In other words, craft and legacy producers alike are rediscovering the hard way that whiskey is cyclical. The boom years encouraged aggressive expansion. 2025 was the hangover. Let's zoom in now on how distributors and wholesalers are responding to all this. In 2025, U.S. distributors faced tariffs, inflation, and that emerging whiskey glut. Discus exports data show U.S. spirits exports down about 9% mid-year, with American whiskey down around 13% as tariffs and weaker demand hit key markets. To cope, distributors are passing through at least part of the 10 to 15% tariff on imported Scotch and other whiskeys. That's adding several dollars per bottle at retail. They're also using staggered price hikes and targeted promotions instead of across-the-board jumps, accepting thinner margins on strategic brands to protect volume. Distributors are also tightening inventories, slowing reorders, and delaying new SKUs to work down excess stock. They're also trimming niche and ultra-premium whiskeys that don't move, focusing on core products that turn reliably. They're also leaning into domestic bourbon, rye, and Canadian whiskey as imported Scotch gets pricier. They're also pushing smaller formats, 375 mLs, 200 ml bottles, minis, and then whiskey-based RTDs that offer lower out-of-pocket costs and faster turnarounds on the shelves. For consumers, that means fewer obscure labels on shelves, more canned cocktails and minis, and a sense that whiskey is on promotion, but not truly cheap. Now, we took a look at the Discus economic reports from 2015 and 2025. Those reports reviewed 2014 and 2024 sales, and while the upcoming report on 2025 will tell a much different story, the comparison provides a solid benchmark for how much the industry has grown in 10 years. In 2015, supplier sales rose 4.1% to around $24.1 billion. Volumes increased 2.3%. And spirits were still clearly behind beer on revenue share, but gaining ground for the sixth straight year. By the 2025 briefing window, looking back at 2024, spirits commanded roughly 42% of total U.S. beverage alcohol revenue, edging past beer for the second straight year. But revenue fell 1.1% even as volume rose 1.1%, underscoring that break in the premiumization pattern. Over those 10 years, tequila and mezcal, American whiskey, and RTDs led the growth, while rum, some vodka segments, and now super premium whiskey tiers have struggled. Craft enjoyed a long boom before hitting the wall. So this is the backdrop as we look ahead to 2026. More on that and my conversation with Becky Harris right after this.
Hey again, it's Gabriel from Jewers. Every holiday has that moment when the food's done and the talking, laughing, and sipping begins. That's where the perfect gift shows up. Jewers 12-year-old. Finished in first fill, unrinsed bourbon casks, and crafted by 6-time Master Blender of the Year, Stephanie McLeod. It's the highest rated 12-year blended scotch out there. A gift that speaks for itself. Because holidays aren't about the gifts we keep, they're about the ones we share. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025, Jewers is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
Craft distillers have suffered the most from the current confluence of events in the whiskey industry, and Becky Harris has seen it all. She's the co-founder of Catoctin Creek Distilling in Purcellville, Virginia, with her husband Scott. She's also a former 2-term president of the American Craft Spirits Association and the current president of the Virginia Distillers Association. How does the current environment affect craft distillers with tariffs and everything? How is it being affected?
Nothing good right now is really going on for craft distillers as far as the overall state of the market is pretty unfriendly to craft distillers right now. As distributors continue to consolidate, as retailers and wholesalers clear their books of things that they don't think are moving enough. Brand building is right now a thing that most wholesalers and retailers aren't interested in. And so it's really cramping down on the ability of craft distillers to get attention for their products and to retail their products. You try to go overseas and now there are tariffs, not to mention, and I honestly feel this is more important for most of us, is that, our inputs are being hit with tariffs. Even if, like my own company, we've been getting American glass for since 2017, I think, whereas we were getting American glass, we got bumped from our supplier We can't place big enough orders, and right now we're competing with the biggest producers for their machine time. So for the first time in a long time, we're having to look to ordering glass from China. And we've been struggling for 6 months to find a consistent supply of our bottles, and the prices are only going higher. So that just keeps eating away at our margin, and we can't pass that along to customers. I mean, everybody's squeezed on one end or another. So, it's just a really tough time for most of us.
How do you see distilleries managing the downturn? How do you see your colleagues managing it?
Yeah, I think what most distillers are doing that I'm talking to is focusing on what they can control, right? What can you control? You can control what goes out your front door. So you're trying really hard to get people to visit your distillery. You're leaning into any kind of club experience or bottle clubs you can do. The Virginia Distilling Association, of which I'm the president, is looking at how can we pass legislation in 2026 that'll give us access to farmers markets. Lots of distilleries around the country do a really good job selling their products at farmers markets. We are not able to do that without a lot of difficult bureaucracy. So we're trying to pass that. We're also trying to get the limits taken off of how much we can pour in our tasting rooms. Wineries and breweries can pour pretty much till basically anyone who's legal to drink is allowed to buy drinks at their place. But in Virginia, we had a very hard cap on that. We're trying to get that cap removed so that we can essentially just do what wineries and breweries do, which is sell products to people who are in a condition to drink them and legally allowed to.
Are you seeing any success stories? Is anybody making it out there?
There are always bright spots. I think there are people who are doing incredible things. The difficulty, though, is that, you can do incredible things. I see those stories all the time of people I'm so proud to have in our industry. But, the ability to kind of continue a trajectory of growth and to get to where you're actually a sustainable business is a really difficult thing in the spirits industry. And I think people see, they think that we make a lot more money on every bottle of spirit than we do. And I think that the biggest thing I hear from people, and mind you, 95% of the bottles on the shelf across this country are made by the largest conglomerates, right? And the medium-sized large conglomerates. But that leaves 5% of the market for craft distillers. And a lot of that is taken up by the larger craft distillers, right? The small craft distillers, the ones who have their tasting rooms, the ones who might not even be paying themselves money to do this, right? They're just trying to make ends meet. Those are the people who are finding that maybe it's just not worth it anymore. Maybe there isn't a way that I can make enough money, doing this, that it's worth my time. And those are the people I think that we are looking at losing. And we lose them. We lose a handful. We lose probably, at least from what I can tell, and I do an informal search every quarter to see, kind of who's shutting their doors, who's disappearing. We're losing a dozen or so every quarter of people who are just like, whether it be a splashy bankruptcy that makes the news, or whether it's just somebody who's just like, yeah, this is it. Our lease is up. Rent is going up. We can't afford to do this anymore. And those are people who are just deciding it isn't worth it. And I think the industry as a whole is going to be poorer for losing those kind of independent small businesses. We small distilleries have a big impact on our local economy. We did an economic study in Virginia that said that the 70 craft distilleries that operate in Virginia have almost $1 billion of economic impact to the state of Virginia. That is not even including the influx of tourism from surrounding states, from DC, from Maryland, from West Virginia. None of that is included. That is only tourism within the Commonwealth and the impact. That's a lot of impact. And I think that is the kind of thing that, we need to, not really as an industry, but we're so highly regulated that it becomes we have to fight our way as small producers to say that there really needs to be a different way for small producers to access the market, whether it be that they can ship their products direct to consumer across the country, much like wineries, whether it's we can ship our products direct to retailers. The wholesalers like to say that we're looking to tear down the three-tier system, and I don't think that is true at all. My wholesale partners are some of the best people in the world. But if I'm starting out in a new state, and I can't sell more than a half a dozen cases in the first month, I'm not going to get a lot of patience from wholesalers at this time. So I think there really needs to be a way that small producers can grow to a size where they are a meaningful contributing member of a wholesaler's portfolio. And at that point, they should be required to get a wholesale partner. That's perfectly fine. But there needs to be a way to deal with the little guys and to give us a way to get our foot in the door. And that's really the kind of thing that I continue to advocate for every time somebody asks me a question.
What role does consumer interest play in keeping craft distilleries healthy?
Oh my goodness. Consumer interest for us is everything. Local consumer support is everything, right? People coming out, choosing to share our products with their friends around the country. The holidays are such a great time for people to gift gifts from small distilleries. All of that is super important. And I think that, most people out there are exploring the places around them. And I think that keeps everybody going.
Thanks to Becky Harris of Catoctin Creek Distilling for joining us on this special year-end episode to add some perspective from the distiller's point of view. So, what's ahead for 2026? I'll have my best guesses right after this. Japanese whiskey began with Shinjiro Tori's vision to reflect the true nature and spirit of Japan. The House of Suntory was founded on these principles, guided by generations of craftsmanship that have transformed time, nature, and precision into something greater than the sum of its parts. Pure waters from the mountains of Hakushu, Mizunara oak shaped by decades of patience, a blending philosophy rooted in harmony. These aren't just techniques, they're a way of thinking, a quiet pursuit of balance and depth. From the layered complexity of Yamazaki to the crisp vibrancy of Hakushu and the elegant artistry of Hibiki, every whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from and the hands that shape it. House of Suntory. This is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
I'm lousy with a crystal ball. I'm much better with a crystal Glencairn in my hand. But let's take a look at what might happen in 2026. Tariffs will continue to affect whiskey sales, even if we don't have every detail just yet. The European Union is scheduled to resume tariffs on American whiskey exports in February, which could have a major impact on U.S. whiskey producers. Overall demand for whiskey is likely to keep declining in developed markets during 2026, driven by economic pressures, health concerns, and the growing impact of GLP-1 weight loss drugs. The new pill version of Wegovy is expected to be a game-changer in that space. As a result, consumers will also continue trading down from high-priced premium whiskeys to more affordable brands. Now, these declines in developed markets should be partially offset by continued growth in India and other emerging markets, where whiskeys, especially Scotch and American, remain aspirational. Prices are unlikely to come down across the board, but look for brands to lean into more affordable luxury options in roughly the $40 to $80 range, and use smaller-sized bottles like the 375 ml Glenfiddich holiday releases to manage out-of-pocket price points. U.S. consumers will probably see better relative value in domestic and Canadian whiskeys compared to imports from Europe and Asia. In developing markets, consumers will see more Scotch and U.S. whiskeys, but at higher prices than domestic spirits, keeping them in the luxury or special occasion bucket. Production in Scotland will likely be reduced further to balance supply with demand. Teaninich is already paused, and I predict several more distilleries may see similar shutdowns or slowdowns in 2026. At least one major Kentucky distillery is likely to be sold during the year. Four Roses remains a prime candidate after reports that Kirin was seeking bids for Four Roses in the billion-dollar range. Overall, Kentucky production should stay similar to 2025 levels, but may be trimmed by around 5% because of the Jim Beam distillery shutdown. This will also be the first year of the barrel tax reduction in Kentucky, though the industry will still likely pay record-high taxes as barrel inventories remain elevated. RTDs will keep growing. So-called ready-to-drink canned spirits were a key force in 2025 and will expand further in 2026, with more brands jumping in and canned cocktails becoming more common. The small format cans used by Ireland's Two Stacks for its whiskeys are a sign of where packaging could go. And craft distilling will likely to continue to contract in 2026, with the biggest impact on smaller distilleries that lack the capital to manage through a slower, more competitive market. This will be a global trend affecting small-scale producers in Scotland, Europe, and Australia and New Zealand, as well as North America. Once again, these are just my predictions, and as I said earlier, I'm much better with a glass in my hand than a crystal ball. I'll have a few closing thoughts right after this.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whisky making process from start to finish. We do things slowly, and we do them right. We start with a smooth, single-grain Irish whisky. We age it in flame-charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice, and signature smoothness. This is a whisky at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
We've talked about a lot of bad news in this episode, but remember, the whiskey industry is coming off years of growth that leave it in much better shape to weather a downturn than it was a decade ago. Excess capacity and high inventories are painful now, but they're also the result of optimism and investment. For drinkers, 2026 may not be the year of endless unicorns and cheap bottles. It is more likely to be the year of more disciplined production and fewer speculative new projects, smaller, more curated retail shelves with a clearer value proposition, and tools like AI-driven flavor profiling that make it easier to find whiskeys that genuinely suit your tastes. If you've enjoyed this look back at 2025 and peek ahead to 2026, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a whiskey-loving friend. We also invite you to download the free Whiskey Cast community app from your app store and join the conversation with like-minded whiskey lovers. You can also find us on social media. Look for Whiskey Cast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Until next time, may your pours be thoughtful and your tariffs someday be zero. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and have a happy new year.